be able to identify these barriers and then look for best practices across the state where people have been creative to overcome these barriers for opportunity youth, and that would really, we'd look to highlight that at one of our quarterly meetings next year as we continue to work, or maybe as we're working in the background on some of the other barriers, such as the one that we talked about with grant funding. How do we have that conversation and get an audience with the proper people to have that appropriate conversation? So just so people understand what our end game is when we have these conversations, and then we're kind of laying that foundation, and then hopefully this is going to get momentum, and we'll continue to identify and find different examples of where it's working or where it wasn't working, and what did people do to try to augment that to drive success.
Yep, that's a really good point.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna do roll call. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, so I'll just read the names in the Zoom list as they appear on my screen. If you don't hear your name read aloud, go ahead and put it into the chat and we'll make sure you're noted as present. So I see Craig Kissinger, Eric Grebner, Marcy Johnson, LaDonna Henson, Molly Cook, Lee Reese, Dean Dittmar, Eric Hill, Linda Dillon, Janelle Washington, Shannon Hampton, Antoinette Golden, and Jasmine. All right, again, if you didn't hear your name read aloud, go ahead and throw it into the chat.
Terrific. Thank you. This is again the reminder of what our deliverables work plan and timeline is for our group. We started out, of course, with identifying what segments are within the opportunity youth. We are now in the stage of identifying the barriers for the opportunity youth to access career pathways. Once we get through that again as well, we will then start thinking about, for our group, what those strategies, solutions, and tools we need to look for, or either create or find, reaching out to the business sector to understand where their needs may be, and then marketing the strategies to all of the stakeholders as we move along. Any questions, feedback on our deliverables work plan and timeline? Okay. So this is just a little reminder for you to think and put into context as we think about what the barriers are. We've talked about barriers being the transportation and involvement for youth that are in correctional facilities. We've talked about foster care students. We've talked about the teacher shortage, special populations that struggle, the lack of career awareness and the lack of parent involvement in career and technical education, graduation requirements, and then not being enough scheduling time for work-based learning, and school counselors having a lack of capacity to support career pathways. And then in our September meeting, additional barriers that came up were, how do we get students under 18 into these high-risk career fields? And we talked about the fact that we have grant cycles that run at different times and they don't match maybe some of the school year grants. And so it makes it really hard to implement a grant. Looking at barriers for the description of, outreach, and, there's a lot that's going on in the field and we don't want to duplicate services, but how do we connect those services? And trying to align our work-based learning continuum to the definition of career exploration. And then one of the other barriers is just that inability to gather evidence of income and grant eligibility in the schools from students. So these are some of the things that we've come up with, the barriers. We'll hear more today from Eric when he presents. And then after the meeting, we're going to then talk more about where we think our barriers are, how to prioritize them, and what to focus on. any questions or barriers that maybe we may have forgot or missed on this list right now? Okay, well, you can always put it in the chat if there's something else that you think of as we move along, or even as Eric talks today, maybe as your thoughts, you want to just be able to document it. Okay, Sarah. So now I'm going to toss this over to Eric Grebner. He's from the Homework Hangout Club in Decatur. And we are just excited to have Eric to join our group. He's going to be able to share with you what's going on with his program and how he supports students, Opportunity Youth students in the field. So Eric?
Well, thank you, Mercy. My name is Eric Rebner. I'm the Executive Director of Homework Hangout Club here in Decatur, Illinois. We've been a program that's been around since 1991. So we have a lot, kind of direct experience working with not only in school, but also out of school youth. Kind of joining me today from my team is Dr. Linda Dillon Taylor, who's our Policy and Systems Manager. And as soon as I get this thing shared, she's going to be kind of running the bulk of the presentation today. I'll be chiming in whenever we get ready to do that. So, well, I have this figured out. I love Zoom. Hold on. From the beginning. Okay, screen 1, screen 2. What just happened? Oh, I love it when it works, except when it doesn't. Hold on. Oh.
There are no worries. We have all, I know,
I would say,
all the
and
time.
Eric, it's happened to all of us. It continues to happen to all of us. So no worries.
Okay. So it might just be that, oh, it is working. It just, there we go. Do we have it?
Okay. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Linda.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. On barriers. And the next screen, Eric, please. In anything that we do, we want to ensure that the mission statement for the purpose, for the agency, for the project is noted, because that becomes the roadmap by which we accomplish whatever it is we choose to accomplish, what the goal is. And for Homework Hangout, it is to provide today's youth, young adults, and low-income families with training, opportunity, leadership, and discipline, which will form an educational, social, and economic partnership through focused coordination of community resources. The next slide is said what we know. There's many things as professionals that we examine and feel that we have learned, which is the case with being at Homework Hangout. But what we know in specifics is that our youth populations, excuse me, can experience barriers that are physical, mental, emotional, cultural, and social, with social elements. The next slide. We know youth populations that HHC serve can experience in-school barriers, out-of-school barriers, systemic barriers, and organizational and structural barriers. And at Homework Hangout, we constantly interface with barriers from these different categories. The next slide shows us that we know specifically HHC in-school youth and out-of-school youth can experience same and shared barriers, which is very common, and I can appreciate the fact that we have recognized and realized the importance of this as we work with both populations. In the next slide, one of the shared barriers is the emotional development. primarily the social development, many agencies, I'll put it like that, or some agencies choose to address each of these developmental stages separately. But we at Homework Hangout have learned that we must bring them together, point them out differently with each participant that comes in the door or in the program, and explain to them, because what we've learned is that they don't really realize or have not recognized or never knew that these categories of development actually exist. And so working with them in our environment, we now have introduced to them specifically, which establishes specific goals, individual and specific goals for each of them to work on as they move through the program. So the social development is key because it, excuse me, it's the process by which a child interacts with those outside of the family in a friendly and open manner. The moral development, the process by which a child develops frames of reference to make truthful judgment. And then the character structure is the system of which a child's relative traits are visible in the specific ways that they relate and react to others. So these are very relevant developmental points in their lives that we have to bring to their attention in order to move to the goals and objectives that they have set and we set for them. In the next slide, it gives another example of a shared barrier, which is the technology navigation. And we saw this tremendously impacting many of our students that come in during 2020 when COVID came in and the schools changed over to the what is it, the Zoom and all of the social media, the web and video conferencing. And many of the students said they didn't have the knowledge. It was intimidating. They didn't know, they fell behind, and then they never caught up. And the discipline that's necessary to be a part of that, not let alone the knowledge, increasing the awareness, you know, and we also learned it has nothing to do with them texting and all that. These are totally different skill sets that they that presented itself as a barrier in them learning how to move forward. And so these are just points within that, the knowledge and awareness that they're able to demonstrate, their attitude and the application, the practice and preparedness, and the review and then evaluate. And the evaluate comes from them. Evaluating, are they comfortable with the necessary navigation that's now a part of the school and the learning process. The next barrier, shared barrier, is, excuse me, a multifaceted issues to thrive. And the next slide. Okay. Again, some programs will identify one or two, maybe three of these issues to deal with, but we have learned we have to address every last one of them. And we cannot eliminate because they build on each other. It's a connection that must be recognized in terms of the person, the individual, the youth, learning how to function within not only our environment, but the environment going out into the community and walking out into the rest of their lives, whether it's employment or home or personal or professional. It all is has a relevant base to it. And what we've learned, basic needs, for example, begins with food. Food is extremely important. At Homework Hangout, we offer both breakfast, lunch, and dinner to our students. We have our programs that started 9:30 in the morning, but they get there about 9 so they can have breakfast. And then we have lunch for them when they finish, and then the next group that comes on at lunchtime, or if they leave at dinner time. So our programs run from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through the week. And so with the different programs and the students coming, the food has become essential. And so we introduced that. We recognizing some of the problems and the challenges they're facing with housing. So with our referral services, the safety, not only the physical environment safety, but mentally, do they feel safe? And so, and then in the permanent connections, the stable, the absence of parents, how do they function? The number of youth that are homeless or living with other friends, or in just different types of settings that they have to learn how to develop permanent relationships. And the education and credentials, yes, they recognize they need it and how to obtain it, but where's the support? It's the support. And I know many of the programs, offer incentives and so forth, like our program. But one of the things that I love about Homework Hangout is when there is a test, or when there's accomplishment, or when they move to the next step, it is openly recognized. It is openly recognized. And we've had the students to say time and time again, I like coming here. I feel safe coming here. You all care about us. And these are things that somewhere was lost, was not connected, they did not experience. And so the support to this in accomplishing or acquiring the education and credentials, the financial stability, here we were big in financial literacy, understanding the importance of saving, understanding the importance of how to manage money. And so that's another component. And then the youth leadership is advocating for yourself. They don't realize the importance. They want to defend themselves, but they don't understand the importance of advocating and what goes into making up that, excuse me, that essential skill, or that essential part of them that, hey, why are you worthy? Let's advocate for you. Let's talk about what that means. So what we've done, we've taken these 5 areas and put them together as issues, and we address them collectively. They have to be a collaboration with these. These cannot be separated or isolated. In the next slide, excuse me, on the youth's well-being, and what we have learned is that when we don't bring those areas, specific areas together, we're not addressing the youth's well-being. And the well-being is crucial, especially emphasized during the COVID, the trauma that the kids, I'm sorry, not kids, the youth are experiencing, will and are trying to move through that. The well-being of the youth is what we're concerned about. And we looked at the next slide with the Cantrell self-anchoring scale. And Dr. Cantrell does a lot of research worldwide. And what we looked at in his work, in this specific work, is the 3 categories that he derived on the one's well-being: the thriving, the struggling, and the suffering. And we can tell you pretty much the majority of students, when they come to us, regardless if they're in school or out of school, they fall between the suffering and the struggling. I don't believe we've had any, and Eric can correct me, that walk in the door thriving. And because of the way we are able to interface with the youth in those previous areas there, we give them insight into the possibility of functioning at the highest level, which is the thriving. Because if they don't learn the skill sets and the importance of one's well-being, when they transition into adulthood, which is just a few years, then will they go into a mode of thriving? Will they be in struggling, or will they be in suffering? And if they, depending on the category, will they contribute to, excuse me, will they contribute to their community, society by doing what? Which of these would be most relevant? And these are the things that we point out to them. When they come in, they're 16, 17, 18, and so forth. But this, what you're seeing is what they see. We share this with them so they get firsthand. Here's where you are. Where do you choose to be? This is why it's so important that we begin with the basic skills, the basic needs, and we advance through the permanent connections and then the support that of the education and credentials and so forth, and so on. So long term, they can see and anticipate. And the question is asked, where do you choose to be in 5 years? Where do you choose to be in the next 12 months? And we emphasize the word choose so they understand it is their choice. We do not say, where do you want to be? It is, where do you choose to be? The next slide.
Linda,
Yes.
on that point, is that do they come in? Is that part of the intake where they take a survey, or do they go through, or is that based on your guys' assessment? How do you derive that? And then is that shared with, I understood you said you shared it with the individual, but is it shared with other people in their support network? A parent, a guardian, a school counselor?
Well, the parent or guardian, yes, because we, let me qualify that, as much as we can, because some parents are more involved than others. And for those, yes, they are, because the parents come in and sit down. During the intake, if you are under 16, 17, and we've had some older, but definitely under the age of 18, the parent must be present. The parent or the guardian must be present. And it's not just an initial contact, it's an ongoing communication that we have. And we develop relationships, we develop partnerships. And so when the parent gets to the point where they're bringing their child in, and well, let me go, because there was a young man that was 19 and his father came in, and we went through the process, and his father started to make excuses for him as to why he had not finished high school and so forth and so on. And so I turned to the young man and I asked him, where do you choose to be? And he looked at me and I said, where do you choose to be? And he said, where do I want to be? I said, that was not my question. I said, where do you choose to be? And so as I went through this the discussion, and the father looked and he said, I guess I never thought about it like that. And so we had a good conversation from that. To answer your question, yes, we share this information with the parents and the guardian. And some of them are receptive and some of them are not. And I will say this, some of the parents admit that this is new information to them. And so they find it to be very beneficial. So yes, we do share it with the school staff. No, we have not shared this with them. We've had meetings where we've discussed it, but no, in terms of them seeing our entire process, no, we've not had we've not, no, we've not had that.
And then my question was, do they complete an inventory for you to put them into one of those categories? Or is it, as you said, a little bit more subjective based on the conversation?
No, when they come in the door, our intake is is pretty comprehensive. There are a series of self-evaluation surveys that they must complete. I believe it's 9. And we look at stress level. We look at how do you handle how I excuse me, how I handle conflict. We look at emotional intelligence. We look at the personality. We look at the trauma through life events. We look at so there's a series of areas that we look at and then sit down and discuss with the individual student. We share that with the parents, but if we have found or we have learned it's a little bit more productive when we're sitting one-on-one with the youth. That way they can share a lot more than what they would normally share if the parents are there. And I can tell you that firsthand. They seem to process it better. Sometimes, we are able to bring the parent in and allow them to, listen. Because many times when we bring the parents in, they want to, it can sometimes become counterproductive because what they interpret is that I've been a bad parent. I'm not a good parent based on the responses that the youth, have given. And that is not the intent at all. So it just depends on, the parent or the guardian and if the youth is receptive to them sitting in on that part.
Thank you.
Okay. The next slide is the organizational and structural barriers. Here is policies, procedures, and situations. And as policy and systems manager, I can tell you, I'm pretty avid about let's get it right the first time. And when we, excuse me, when we have the different students, the youth that come in the door, the next screen, Eric, please. We see these areas of concern coming in the door. So we have to decide, or the program has to decide what Homework Hangout has done. We've decided in one of the 3 areas, whether it is prevention, intervention, or excuse me, care referral. Excuse me. I guess I didn't take enough allergy pills this morning, the sinus pills. But when the youth come in, we factor in, where they're coming from, because by the time they get to this point, we have quite a bit of information about them. And the information helps us to determine if they are motivated to work through these issues, if they need an independent resource that will help them specifically with this area, or if they have already addressed it and is managing the issue to the best of their ability, and we can provide the support. And I'll give you an example. Many of our students come in, our youth come in, and they say, I have anxiety issue. I'm being treated for anxiety. So forth, and specifically in anxiety. And my question to them, and this is during the interview, the intake interview, and I asked them, what is it you need us to know that can help you to move through this program successfully? And they think a little bit, but then they'll come back and say, well, because of my anxiety, and they'll give me the story, and they say, and this is what I do. And so I said, okay, then let's come up with a plan that you'll be able to use, not disrupt the class and not disrupt anybody else, and you're able to overcome or better manage that anxiety attack or the anxiety or the anxiousness you're feeling. So what we've done, they tell us. So if they need to stand up, move to the back of the room, and will, shift their bodies, or, they do what they need to do within 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, and then they'll return to the instruction. Sometimes if they get so anxious, and we're able to monitor and see this, they'll go and lean up against a wall or lean up against the window. We've had one student that when he got anxious, he got up and he gave us a signal and he went over to the gym. He walked 2 or 3 laps in the gym, then he comes back to the class. Those are areas. Can I go back to the previous screen, Eric, for a minute, please? Those are the unique areas when we start looking at what the youth actually is coming in the door, and they are trying to manage and trying to accomplish the goals that have been set for them. We have to be more alert in terms of not putting them in, they don't fit in this square or they don't fit in this circle. We have to say, okay, what do we need to do in order to help you to manage this, in order for you to get through this process? And these are examples of what we've done. Now, by no means am I saying we're equipped to handle everything that you're seeing here. What I am saying is that we recognize it, and we recognize that each of these areas have a space and a place, and that we have looked into the community and the available local resources that we've identified that will work with us and the youth through these particular areas. Because each one of them in itself can become problematic. So, but we focus on the mental health and well-being, which is where the education, the employment, so forth and so on. That's where, as I say, we stay in our lane. Now, if we have students that, fall into some of the other categories, it cannot become the primary. It cannot become the primary. So they have to learn to manage those issues, those problems, those situations in order to accomplish their goal, which is to get the complete the vocational program with national credentials and their education. What I just explained to you is the from the organization's mission going into, again, the enrollment, what are the specific policies? And then the services, what are the specific procedures in order to accomplish what the original goal or the original objectives are? So it's very, very clear. And the policies and the procedures have to go back and support the organization's mission. And the next screen, we have the out-of-school barriers. Excuse me. What do we know? In Maslow's, okay, thank you. In Maslow's hierarchy of school needs, this just reinforces what I've said previously, but it gives you a better visual, in my mind anyway, that we start at the very lower, which is the physiological, which is, again, the basic need. And we're building until we get to the self-actualization. Once we get them to the point of self-actualization, now they are more receptive to embracing different uncomfortable scenarios and situations. They're learning how to better manage and work through. I had a youth to tell me, and the resilience in our life skills is where we target. We offer basic and advanced life skills that target these specific areas that we train them, we teach them, we coach them until they're able to produce at an acceptable level that is comfortable with them. In other words, they learn to stretch beyond what they have settled for. So we teach them the strength to stay and the courage to move forward. Now, 4 of the 6 programs that we have, or I should say not program, but the populations that we service, to give you an example of the titles of the life skill areas, looking at the specific categories, they require different areas of subject matter. And these are the examples that we consistently use, and we've learned that they are successful because they're targeting very specific issues within that population.
So do you find that more kids fit into one of those boxes? I said you don't like to put them into a box, but do you find that more of the kids, so like 80% of the groups fall into one particular box or another?
Yes, and there's some overlapping sometimes.
Absolutely.
But for the most part, they do fit into those particular categories. And we've just learned from working with them, these are the specific needs. These are the specific issues that they lack. And that's what we're trying to address, the lack. Them just trying to become comfortable with themselves. We don't accept no. We don't accept no. So ask a question. And that's what you say. Ask a question, ask a question. Don't walk away and say, I assume, or I think, or maybe they meant. No, you come back, ask questions. That's learned behavior. And so when we introduce these in both the basic and advanced life skills, and there's, I think there's 15 total lessons. But when we introduce these, depending on the category, they are able to comfortably engage, and be able to converse with it. They'll be able to give examples. We had one youth not too long ago. He came to me and he said, Ms. Dillon, he said, I didn't even know I had skills until I came to Homework Hangout. And this young man, I mean, he has just shot to the top in terms of his performance. I mean, he volunteers. I mean, it's just remarkable in terms of once they reach that point of self-actualization, how readily they are to embrace change and establish objectives and goals and so forth. Okay, yes, we're going to the systemic barriers now. The next screen. And we just know that systemic barriers, are obstacles, policies, or procedures that place unequal value on individuals and communities. The barriers include, and I gave examples here, but the bottom line is the majority of it is Title VII. And you look at that, the next screen tells us, or gives a basic example of the barrier that's there. In the first square there, the first thing you see, everybody's pretty much being given equal service, but is that achieving the equal is causing the disparity of treatment is what it is. And so in the next slide, you see that now they have position, and a third, remove the barrier. So our specific example of a barrier for Homework Hangout, I'm going to let Eric take it over, is a 16-year-old not allowed to take GED.
And thanks, Linda. The main reason why I wanted to give a very specific example is the problem sometimes with trying to identify or understand systemic barriers is that sometimes we see them more in the abstract, meaning that we see the results of it. We know because of demographics and statistics that there is an obvious systemic barrier here, but sometimes it's hard to kind of find specific things in here. But this is one that has been, for us, running an out of school time program, very, very problematic for us in trying to work with youth and trying to achieve outcomes for youth. Currently, if you're an out of school participant, once you reach 18 years of age, you can sign up to take GED. Don't have to get additional clearances, just have to sign up for it. If you're 17, though, you can take the GED, provided you get proof of high school dropout from a previous school district, like a withdrawal letter. Oftentimes, we're helping participants reach out to ICCB to get that clearance so they can move forward and clear the alerts and take the exams. Now, however, a lot of our programs are out of school time. That includes Youth Build, that includes Youth Career Pathways. We're serving participants ages 16 to 24, and that includes GED instruction. Right now in Illinois, if you're 16, you're only allowed to take the GED if you are an enrollee of Lincoln's Challenge Academy. ICCB says there's 2 other programs, regional safe schools, alternative learning opportunities, but what I've been told, and I'm actually giving a direct quote from ICCB here, that it's all based in the Illinois school code is the reason why 16-year-olds, other than very specific enrolled programs, very specific exceptions, are allowed. Now, the reason is we consider this a systemic barrier for 16-year-olds is that, the only way that they can overcome this barrier is going to involve some kind of change in the system, in the legislation, the laws, and the procedures and the policies with this. And this is very crucial for us. Now, we have a lot of 16-year-olds who are currently enrolled here, and they're in the same programs as their peers who are 17 years old, 18 years old. They're all in GED. They're all taking the same classes. They're all doing really well in the classes. And then they're watching their peers take the tests. They're watching them pass the test while they're still stuck waiting. And that wait, that period of time is very dismotivating for them. It can affect their self-esteem, kind of does to drive, well, they're going on, they're moving on, they're getting their GED, why can't I do it? And more importantly, you got an arbitrary extension of time here where the participant we as a program have to keep them academically engaged. They might be ready. They might be ready to go, especially if they're just coming out of high school, just dropped out. They still got the knowledge there. They're primed, ready to take the test, get their GED, and move on with the program, move on with their lives, get employment, but they're being delayed, and it can't strike when the iron is at its hottest, so to speak. That's going to cause them to lose motivation and experience. And then when they're waiting to be able to take that test another year, there might be a bit of a knowledge gap there because they may not stay engaged. It hurts us too, as an out of school time program. I mean, we have performance metrics that include GED attainment. They're in the WIOA metrics, for example, and they have to be attained within a certain period of enrollment or within a year, and all these kind of cause delays. In addition, you may have 16-year-old participants who they complete the rest of the program, they get employed, they graduate, they're getting pressure from that household to get out there and work and make income. So then they leave, they exit the program. They're successful on the books, on paper, because they achieved credentials, achieved everything else, and they're getting out there and work without having getting their GED. What that kind of forces us to do is then, during their follow-up is one of 2 things. Either we have to refer out so they can continue potentially getting GED services, or we have to provide follow-up services ourselves, additional instruction that can be, a considerable expense to do in order to make sure that the programs are getting GED and that they're getting GED. And trust me, we want them to get that GED. So, I mean, the major solution to this is, one is kind of a general one, and it sounds easy, but I know it's pretty hard, is that the processes need to be changed so that the 17-year-olds who can take the GED test that provide proof of high school withdrawal, make those apply also to 16-year-olds. The other idea is broaden the list of accepted programs to include WIOA-funded programs, or any out-of-school time program, or maybe there's a metric criteria that can be gotten and a way of showing that. But all of these aren't quick changes. They're going to require intervention at the state level, legislative, ICCB. They're going to require pushes by groups such as these to help do it. Because right now, you got a bunch of 16-year-olds who are motivated out there, willing to complete programs, who are getting stuck waiting. And that wait is causing them to lose the academic engagement and drop out. So this is a systemic barrier, very specific to 16-year-olds who are now school time programs. So that is pretty much my spiel with that.
Thanks, Eric and Linda.
And
That was really great.
Ms. Dillon, did you want to finish up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That there is no quick fix for any type of barrier and no one size fits all. That, the next screen. Think big, conduct comprehensive barrier reviews, and execute barrier removal plans. Okay, thank you. What squares with your thinking from today? In other words, what are the main takeaway points? And do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're opening, just so we know, we have 10 minutes left in the meeting. We want to open up the floor to questions, I think, and then still have some time to make sure we add all the applicable barriers to our list. So do we have any questions for Eric and Linda?
This is LaDonna Henson, and I was just wondering, how is this funded? Who funds this program?
We're pretty broad funded through a lot of federal and state resources. We have WIOA programs, both at the federal and the state level, that funds a lot of our out of school time programs right now. But no, yeah, a lot of this is also through state funding as well.
From what agencies?
Department of Human Services, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
Okay.
Great question, LaDonna.
Thanks, Linda and Eric, for the presentation. Quick question: how many students are in the program? Average age and range of age?
As far as our programs, we have both in-school programs that range 6 through 17, and then all of our out-of-school time programs are 16 to 24.
And how many total, or does it vary by the day?
Total in what sense?
Meaning students that are participating.
It does kind of vary year to year. I know right now, if you're kind of adding up all our programs, we have about 200 people registered in our programs for this year.
And how wide of a is it just Decatur, or do you, what's your service radius?
We primarily serve Decatur and Macon County.
Have you networked with, do you think in the space in which you serve, and maybe Molly, I know you kind of get into some of these same areas, is in talking with your peers that operate in this space, do you feel that the barriers that you discussed are representative statewide, and the challenges trying to integrate those services, as we're talking, getting the parents engaged, getting the information in the school, and secondary resources that are outside of your purview?
Well, to an extent, I know a lot of our presentation kind of overall implies the level of complexity of the barriers that we have and across many domains. And I think that complexity as an abstract is going to be shared. The systemic barrier that I mentioned specifically is definitely applicable to everyone, because you know, that's affecting all Illinois programs. There are other states I know that allow, for example, 16-year-olds to take the GED. But as far as a lot of the other barriers that we discussed, I think there's some general ones that are going to be more applicable kind of across just from our field of experience, because a lot of it kind of comes down to, you know, generational issues. I mean, this is a generation that specifically shares COVID, specifically shares a lot more awareness of mental illness and mental health, other issues that are kind of coming specific to them. So it's a lot of it's going to have applicability to all programs.
Similar to the teacher shortage, are you keeping adults helping with the program or hired to help the students?
Yes. Most of our staff, we usually don't really have much turnover. I actually have to go figure this out. I think the average, you know, 12, 13 years is probably our average right now as far as people who are employed in this organization. I myself have been here, it'll be 25 years in February. So I mean, it's part of it's the environment, part of it's, you know, we make sure that we support a lot of our staff who are in, so.
Okay, so we're at 6 minutes, and I'm just going to share my screen of the black barriers listed in the black font are from previous meetings, and the green are what I just jotted down during.
Sarah, I think you're on your wrong screen.
Okay, so hold on one second. Apologies. I will share now. How about this?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So then the green are from during the conversation that Eric and Linda just had with us. Are there any that we missed? Do we want to, and what needs to be added to this list? I have lack of emotional development, lack of knowledge practicing and practice to navigate technology, basic needs, the lack of support for education credentials, financial literacy, lack of leadership skills, lack of experience or social skills, significant barriers to employment, and parameters around GED qualifications. Like I said, this is just from the conversation. So, we have any that we want to add?
I think this looks great, Sarah. You did a great job of capturing the presentation information. And I just want to add that I'm incredibly impressed with the holistic approach, not just to service and barrier reduction, but coaching. That this is, you guys do incredible work. And I'm just impressed with the depth of holistic services that you're offering and the way that you're framing barriers well beyond traditional workforce barriers. So I think this kind of takes it to another level, allowing, and by us hearing this and bringing it to, you know, to our list really takes us to another level. So massive kudos to the work you're doing, and the longevity you just described, Eric, of your team certainly attests to the quality that your team believes it's delivering. So, I mean, without, you know, knowing you in a deeper way, I'm very impressed with what we've heard today. Thank you.
Thank you as well. We appreciate the opportunity. We're busy people, so we don't get a lot of time to try to share this because we're too kind of in the thick of it a lot of times. So it's good to present a lot of this, and especially to a group that I think could potentially address some of these things that have been ongoing, and where I think a lot of times there's sometimes we see this as quick fixes, or hey, we just add this or throw my, and the issue is very, very, very complex, and it's a very complex range. So I'm glad we have a chance to illustrate that.
So Marcy, I think from here we should push out these list of barriers, have people rank them, and then I think, you know, depending on this barrier, I think it'll be this group to determine, you know, what's next. How do we address that particular barrier? And I think Eric has given us, Eric and Linda, thank you so much. I think, you know, you're not only have you helped identify barriers, I think as we move through this, you may help us identify these solutions and be part of the discussion for the systemic ones for sure. But as you guys, as Molly said, address the holistic approach, you know, that without some of those other addressing those barriers, they're never going to have success, right? Because they just keep on repeating a cycle, you know, with the emotional and social barriers. So I think this was good. So do you think we push out this list of barriers, Marcy, and ask people to rank them and comment on them?
Yeah, I would say, if no one else has any other barriers that maybe they heard today that we need to add, Sarah, I think, has a form that she could send out and people can rank it. And then in our next meeting, you know, we will share that and then think of next steps.
And do you think we should leave a space at the bottom of that to kind of open forum to,
Yeah.
if you have ideas, or, you know, I think again, as we look to our end game of highlighting examples of success, right? You know, if you know of examples across the state in your own network where somebody has looked at some of these barriers and has done a good job of addressing them that we can share with a greater population, that's really kind of one of our goals, is to start brainstorming, you know, where can we share some of those success stories? Because I really like the way Eric and Linda, you guys are using multiple funding streams to address the issues and the things, your objectives of what you're trying to impact with the youth.
Yep, sounds good. So watch for an email from Sarah where she'll share out the survey, and then we have a slide about our next meeting. Sarah?
So we were going to decide if we wanted to do reoccurring meeting times, like set it down that like second Wednesday, 10 o'clock in the calendar, or if we want to do, you know, keep scheduling for the next month at the current meeting. I don't know if we want to try to make that decision now, and then based on that, I'll send, you know, a follow-up doodle poll or calendar invite.
How does everybody feel about that? Would you like to have more discussion about it and we decide at the next meeting, or do you want to get you know, recurring meetings on your calendar so that they're set, like, you know, second Wednesday of every month or whatever the case may be? I'm not, that's just a, you know, but do you want something like that, or would you like to have a conversation, or do we just want to come up with different dates each month because we know how busy everybody is? Any thoughts?
For me, it's better if it's a recurring meeting and I go ahead and get them on the calendar because I have so many of them already.
Mm-hmm. And if we do that, is there certain, like, you know, like you said,